The 2023 NFL Draft is right around the corner, and the New York Giants, they're going to look to bolster their roster via the draft after a very busy free agency season for Big Blue. So let's break it down with an NFL draft analyst. He works for NBC Sports. You can also see him on the Jets pre- and post-game show. He's here with me now. That show was on SNY. Connor Rogers. Connor, how's it going?
I'm doing great, man. I love this time of year. It's exciting. It's also great that, the Jets and Giants not in the top 5, top 10 range of the draft this year. A little bit more creativity, a little bit of a better vibe for each franchise, I think, right now.
Yeah, I like that. We could talk about the creativity around the teams. Now, before we get into the specifics with the Giants, I got to ask you, what do you think are the biggest areas or biggest needs that the Giants have heading into this draft?
The obvious one is an outside wide receiver with size. You look at all the additions or the guys they've brought back that can play in the slot. They're typically undersized options. And you love that they got Darren Waller, who really is that move tight end, a true pass catcher in the middle field with size and catch radius. But you'd still like to have that at wide receiver, and everybody's been all over that, especially in the back end of round one. But this is a smaller wide receiver class. I also look at center for the Giants. This is a strong center class. It has talent at the top with a guy like John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. Joe Tippmann has gotten a lot of love from Wisconsin as well. So I would never rule out a center at the back end of round one. They've been doing a ton of work on the cornerbacks. The problem with that is the corner class, the run on the corners is going to start early, and it's going to go often. So the Giants' needs, they do align with where there's a couple strengths of this draft, but they have a long, long wait ahead of them.
All right. So you brought up a bunch of things there, and I want to get into some specifics. I want to start off first with, I think, what a lot of Giants fans want to know, which is wide receiver, right? So this offseason, you mentioned they added tight end Darren Waller via trade. They signed Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder, and Richie James. All of that was done in free agency. Now, they got rid of Kenny Galladay, cut him, re-signed Darius Slayton. However, none of those guys, those wide receivers, are true number one target. We know the Giants, they locked up their franchise QB in Daniel Jones for 4 more years, but they still need to get him some weapons. So could we see the Giants take a wide receiver in the first round? And if so, what type of receiver could they be looking to draft?
I think it's definitely in play, and they've been preparing that way. They've been handling visits and dinners and the whole kind of wave of draft season that comes with getting to know prospects and keeping a closer eye on them. Wide receiver has been one of the positions at the top of that list. Now, when you look at it, this class has a clear-cut front runner in the group in Jackson Smith-Njigba that I don't think makes it anywhere near 25. So the Giants will have to look beyond that. And if you want to look at size, you look at my wide receiver 3 in Quentin Johnston from TCU. He's over 6 feet, 2 inches tall. He's got the catch radius. He's actually really good with the ball in his hands. I think he needs to work on becoming a little bit more natural of a pass catcher, especially when you play with that size and you want to win above the rim. You need to find ways to consistently win the football, not just have big flashes here and there. But the build-up speed is phenomenal. The Giants have been doing a lot of work on Quentin Johnston. And here's the most important part. At pick 25, I think that's right in his range. So the Giants easily could look there if they want to be patient and look to solve a different position group in the first round. Round 2 does have depth, whether it's a guy like Cedric Tillman from Tennessee, who's in my top 5 wide receivers. He was banged up in 2022. He was phenomenal in 2021, what he was able to do against both Alabama and Georgia. A guy that understands how to shield defenders to win the football, plays with an edge, 6'3", 215 pounds, has that downfield speed you're looking for, but really can win in the intermediate area of the field. So the Giants, the strategy is going to be fascinating. Are they going to floor it and say at 25, if a guy like Quentin Johnston is there, we just have to have him because we don't have a player like this in our wide receiver room? Or are they going to stay patient, stay true to their board, look to bolster a different area and say, we'll capitalize on the depth of the wide receiver class on day 2 instead?
So that'll be the question there. And one of the other areas, as you mentioned, that they could look to possibly bolster is cornerback. But you said that there could be a lot of guys going early with cornerback. And right now, Dory Jackson is the number 1 CB on the Giants roster. The depth has been a question at DB for Wink Martindale's defense. Could you see them adding a DB early in the draft in the first round? Or do you think they will look in later rounds to add more talent to that position group?
I certainly wouldn't rule it out. Now, number one, corners are really the engine that drives Wink Martindale's defense because it's a pressure-based defense that leaves them on an island more often than any other defense in the NFL. And that means you need talent at that spot because they have the most difficult job of anybody playing within this defense. And you make a great point about the lack of depth and the lack about a sure thing for the long term at the cornerback spot. Listen, the Giants were on the corners at the top of last year's draft, and Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner. Those guys went. They didn't have a chance to get them. So they've been operating the same way this year, but knowing how much later they pick in the draft, the guys that are going to go in the top 10, Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, they're not going to have a shot at them. As much as I know they love Witherspoon, they just know that those days are over of him falling to their selection. Even Joey Porter Jr. or Deonte Banks are two corners looking in that 15 to 22 kind of range. You have Washington, you have Baltimore, maybe the Chargers looking to add corner help as well. Those guys will probably be gone before the Giants pick. So at 25, unless they made a move, which would surprise everybody if they were aggressive in this draft at this early of Joe Shane's tenure, then you're kind of in this range of Cam Smith from South Carolina. You have Keely Ringo from Georgia, DJ Turner from Michigan. These are really, really good players. But the question is, are they worth taking at the 25th overall pick? Or would you rather wait to the back end of round 2 and see which one of the tier 3 and tier 4 corners falls into your lap? That's the difficult decision the Giants have to make. But knowing Wink Martindale, I think he would be pounding the table and saying, get me some corner help with one of these top 260 selections.
Yeah, I feel like the Giants coordinator is going to be asking for a lot of help, right? The offensive coordinator wants some wide receiver help. The defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, is going to want some corner help for sure as well. Now, the Giants, they've drafted 2 tackles in the first round, 2 out of the last 3 drafts, Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. So after the departures of Nick Gate and John Feliciano, the starting center spot is up for grabs. Could the Giants look to add a center in that 2nd to 3rd round range?
Yeah, I think it's perfect for them. I really do. Now, if they do wait that long, they're probably taking themselves out of the first tier of the centers. John Michael Schmitz, he'll probably be gone. You'd have to take him at 25. I think a guy like Joe Tittman might even be gone, but you got a shot at Luke Whippler from Ohio State, a smaller guy, but moves so well, gets out in front of screens, out in the run game, makes protection calls at the line of scrimmage when he needs to. Very high IQ kind of player. Same could be said about Olu Oluwatimi from Michigan. This is somebody that has multiple years of starting experience, played on a great Michigan offensive line this year. I think you can get him in round 3. I think he's a player that's been underappreciated in this draft process. Another guy that fits that classic center mold of high IQ, team leader, tough guy, and very, very great awareness and pass protection to help on stunts, twists, picking up blitzes. So the Giants, I actually look at their team and go, as much as they desperately need a center, when you look at how this draft class is going to fall, you look at how the position typically falls. Teams wait on center. Some of the best centers in the NFL right now did not go in the first round, especially when you look at a guy like Creed Humphrey in recent history on the Chiefs. So I think the Giants can afford to wait and still get a guy that can come in and start from day one, because so many centers in this draft were multi-year starters in college, playing at a high level in difficult conferences in terms of level of competition.
That's a great point, and being able to find good centers where you can get some value in later rounds there. Now, when it comes to talking about value in the NFL draft, there's a lot of debate about what are you going to do when it comes to running backs. And with the Giants running back, Saquon Barkley, he was slapped with the franchise tag this offseason. He's about to turn 26 years old. He is looking for a long-term deal. He's not going to participate in offseason workouts. And we saw the Giants re-sign Matt Breida, but could the Giants look to add a late-round running back to get some more depth to that running back room? Do you think that can happen, Connor?
I think they have to. And the reason I look at it like that is because you look at Saquon, he's on that 1-year deal. And yeah, you can go back-to-back with the franchise tag, but the amount of injuries running backs deal with at the NFL level, especially Saquon Barkley's career as well, Matt Breida's career as well. These guys have been banged up before. It naturally happens at the position. You need depth, especially a team that I think they want to run the ball, or at least establish the run to open up the play-action pass game, open up more of a threat, or make life easier on their quarterback in Daniel Jones. And you look at the depth of this running back class, everybody knows the star talent at the top. Bijan Robinson's going to go in the first round. Jahmyr Gibbs will probably go in the top 40 picks. but there's a ton of depth, especially when you look at day 3 of this draft. Can you go get a guy like Eric Gray from Oklahoma, who's a jack-of-all-trades player and would really fit your offense because you could trust him in pass protection, you could trust him to catch the ball. Tank Bigsby from Auburn, somebody that did not get a lot of blocking help in the SEC from his Auburn front, but has a thick lower half that breaks tackles, drives the pile. We know Brian Dable will appreciate that. And even you look at Dwayne McBride from UAB, who's been one of the most productive running backs in college football over the last 2 years. Not a pass catcher, but a downhill runner that can finish his runs with power, that has enough burst and vision to find lanes to pick up chunk plays. So there's really, really good running backs that are going to go in the first 2 to 3 rounds of this draft. But I love the depth at day 3 and think that's the area the Giants should be looking in.
Connor, right now, one last thing I'll ask you on the Giants is, what does your gut tell you? What do you think the Giants will do with their first-round pick? Do you think it's a wide receiver? Do you think it's a corner? Where do you think they're leaning towards going when it comes to that?
I think what's helped them specifically at wide receiver is that the NFL as a whole has cooled on this wide receiver class. We saw last year there was such urgency around the class. Drake London went 8th. Garrett Wilson, the offensive rookie of the year, went to the Jets at the end of the top 10. The Saints moved up for Chris Olave. Washington took Jahan Dotson earlier than we thought he would go. The Lions moved up for Jamison Williams. There was this arms race to go get wide receivers. Outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't see that in this class. Everybody's fixated on the corners, the quarterbacks, the offensive linemen, the pass rushers. And for the Giants, knowing wide receiver is one of their biggest needs, that might play to their advantage that at 25, they like a guy and he falls into their lap traditionally when he might not have. So I think 25, I think it'll ultimately, if Quentin Johnson is there, that makes a lot of sense. But knowing how they need to build up the trenches as well, I would never rule out the center pick at 25 if they wanted a top guy, if they saw a clear-cut guy. The reason why it's hard to get behind corner, as much as they've done so much work there, is because a lot of cornerbacks are going to go in front of where they pick. So my gut feel says wide receiver, because with the flow of the draft right now, it feels like one of the top 3 will be there for the pickings at pick 25.
All right, Giants fans are going to be paying very close attention to Connor Rogers, his analysis, his mock drafts leading up to the draft. Very busy time for Connor Rogers. Connor, thank you for the time on the Giants. Thank you to everybody for watching this 2023 NFL Draft Preview.